across the galaxy. This is where conspiracy on the wild side meets the perspective of a lifetime. This is the Free Zone with your host, Freeman.
Hello and welcome to the Free Zone. Well, here we are in our self-destructive oscillations, trying to find our planet and understand what's going on in life on planet Earth. It's important that we understand the nefarious plans of the overlords as they try to bring us down through our own self-righteous indignations. That's right. Either side, no matter which way you look at it, is bouncing off the other in these oscillations. I mean, when we consider the burning of Notre Dame and the ideas that followed that, the rise of the ideas of Chrislam and unified churches and unified religions, and we see also the other side where a group of beings feels attacked. Okay, so the idea that no reports and nowhere in the Twitter sphere did any of the people talking about the incident at Notre Dame call them Christians. No, they were known as Easter worshipers. Easter worshipers, yes, not Christians. And so withholding this very word then instills an oscillation in our mindset as we try to battle with, is there an attack on Christianity? Are you expected to fight back? Is this an intended attack? And these oscillations go back and forth while the center never gets seen. So to dig more into this truth and try to understand what the heck is going on planet Earth, we have brought back James True. You can find him at jtrue.com and get deep into his articles. We're definitely going to dig into Behold a Pale Horse's Ass today, and probably dig into some of William Cooper's thoughts as well, and getting deep into the mindset that creates the oscillations, that keeps the battle going so the elite can continue to create their new world order. So welcome, James, to the Free Zone.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Freeman.
Hey, not a problem. Love to talk with you all the time. We had a great talk last time, and I know we're going to get deep today. So let's begin with your article, Behold a Pale Horse's Ass, because, you know, I've got a little bit of an insider knowledge on this situation. I have sat in the chair with Alex Jones on numerous occasions and constantly questioned by people, well, isn't he a shill? Isn't he an insider? Hasn't he been bought and paid for? And constantly and consistently, I've said, no, I don't believe that. As all the people that are destroying the planet, they always think they're doing it for the right reasons. So let's dig into that a little bit, because you see, it doesn't require a paid shill to get done what the operatives need done. It takes, I've always put it this way. You don't need to create a Marilyn Manson. You need to create the culture that a Marilyn Manson will thrive in. And then it rises to the surface. And the ego of that person will carry it forward without any time being strapped into an MK Ultra chair. Right, James?
That's exactly right. No one needs to sit in a dentist chair when you're controlling the world with dopamine. All of us have our receptors, and we're brought up by a culture which makes us predictable. So it's not going to take much to find someone that maybe is a little bit on the narcissistic spectrum, or someone who's willing to hollow themselves out and say whatever it takes to feel fulfilled. Once you create a culture like that, it's going to be like picking mushrooms. You might not have planted that one particular mushroom that you picked, but you sure did set all the tools that you needed, all the lighting conditions, all the atmosphere, everything about it set in place, and you knew that that mushroom would come up. That's why these assets aren't planned or built. They're plucked, they're chosen. And that's something that's hard for people to see as they're divining truth, because they think that lies come from the deceivers and truth comes from the good guys, and the bad guys are secretly been turned into mental machines, and the good guys are, you know, secretly the other way. And what you have instead is you have a grid of 9 alignments, you know, from chaotic good to lawful good to neutral good to chaotic evil to neutral to lawful neutral. You have all these different transits that these assets can be. And if you're going to look at the world through the lens of good and evil, or programmed or non-programmed, or shill or non-shill, or sold out or not sold out, you're never going to see the world. Ironically, you're digitizing the world, which is exactly what they want us to do.
Yeah, we're definitely fulfilling many of their needs. I can't believe more people weren't skeptical of putting their face on Facebook back in the day. I've been tracking that kind of track tracing since Echelon. We used to do it on the cord phone. We knew we were being listened to, much less going into Facebook, giving all your data and your biometrics and everything else to them. And it's crazy how much we want to participate in this.
Yeah, that's the emotional ploy that makes all of us assets, and I include myself in that. My face is all over the place.
Yeah.
I approach this technology from a trusting standpoint. We were programmed a long time ago that if you extend blind trust to someone else, it makes you a good person somehow, that you are now elevated into someone who's compassionate or the modern man because you're willing to trust something blindly. That's what makes us all an asset. None of us are willing, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say none of us. So many of us are not willing to ask the question, is that true? To look directly in the face of what's staring at them and go, maybe the cause of the fire being unknown is not a fact in the case of Notre Dame. Maybe there actually is the cause. Maybe the cause is known. Maybe I'm not being told the cause for a specific reason. And it's only when you start to do that you start to abandon the emotions that kept you locked in that same chair that Alex Jones is in, where you're still being true to yourself, but you're serving a much larger machine and there's no chain attached to you at all. You're actually being fed for it with dopamine.
Right. And people want to find the information that justifies what they already believe. Nobody's willing to branch out of their own belief system and start seeking knowledge that would destroy what they want to believe.
That's the hardest part about it. And this article, Behold a Pale Horse's Ass, cost me a lot of people that I thought were kind of allies with me in the truth. And it's because I explained that what we're looking at is a wrestling match, and countries aren't what we think they are. And if you can imagine Hulk Hogan versus the Desert Darkness, this really bad character, you're going to want a good wrestling match, which means Hulk Hogan needs to be blonde and tan and orange and red and real bright colors like Trump. And you need your desert guy to be evil. He needs to be mean. He has to break rules. He has to kick sand in your face. He has to spit at your women. Like, imagine going to a wrestling match and it's Steve, he's a plumber from Des Moines, versus Carl, he's a roofer from Kentucky. Both these guys have good families, they volunteer. Watching that fight is not going to be nearly as fun as watching a fight between Hulk Hogan and the Desert Darkness character. These archetypes, these visual jingling keys, are what gives us the illusion of power and, more importantly, narrative. The most colorful specimen you can bring into the room is going to define what the narrative is. And so many of us don't realize that. We read the stories in the newspaper. Because it says the New York Times, that sigil gives us the impression that we're now informed. But the New York Times described the Notre Dame saying, it's a dusty old church attic. It was built to burn. Like, that was their take on the story. That's sort of like verbatim quotes. But then if you interview the last architect of the cathedral, the head architect, he describes that in 2010, the most advanced fire prevention system ever was installed there. There is zero electricity up in top of the attic, and there are 2 staff members that are there 24/7 to monitor all the alarms, to check on every single part of that. So the narrative that you're given, the emotional hook, the thing that you buy, the corn dog that you sink your teeth into, is the idea that the cause of the fire is unknown. But then below that is actually the truth. What really happened? Why were there 16 statues? All of them were decapitated. These are solid bronze poured statues, and each one of them is decapitated before it's airlifted on a helicopter with no covering for posterity. It's decapitated, and then it's raised up on a helicopter like a rapture ceremony. This is all a week before the fire. These things go,
Decapitated saints.
yeah, and these things go back. If you look in the history of Notre Dame, that's a limestone cathedral. Of course, all the Paris is covered 200 miles of catacombs of limestone quarries beneath there. That island, that exact same island of Paris, fits the same markings as Manhattan. It's a ritual circle that's bound by water, and Paris is bound by the Seine. And in the middle of it, you have an ancient temple of Isis that used to be on the same spot that Notre Dame is. And then you have this other structure that's put on top of it. And so for 800 years, it sat with no light entering through the roof. And 3 days before Good Friday, 3 days before the pink full moon, 3 days before Easter weekend, you have a fire that's set. You have a ritual that burns the roof out. And for the first time in 800 years, the waxing moon of Isis, which would represent the crescent, is shining down into that cross. So you have a giant cross, the structure of Notre Dame itself, and it's being imbued with a fire ritual that sends in all this crescent light. This is the emergence of Isis. And then 2 days later in Sri Lanka, we have a painting of Isis as the perpetrators of this other attack on a Buddhist country, by the way. So it's interesting to see that what's happening here is there are three children of Abraham. You've got Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Two of those children are fighting right now. One child is never being blamed. One child never gets attacked. There were 3 fires that day. The one in Jerusalem wasn't inside a Jewish temple. It was inside a mosque. So you have the Islam versus Christianity, the cross versus the crescent, Jesus versus Muhammad. This is something Don King would plan, but on a world stage. And as a wrestler would say, can you smell what the temple rock is cooking?
Yes, exactly. And always the people in the middle thinking it's their fight to get into. And I can't help but think of the mystery man that was walking across the top of the cathedral prior to the fire and the strange flashes of light that we're seeing. It's as if the conspiracy theory had to be planted in this story. And
exactly,
let's get this mystery Muslim looking dressed person walking the halls of the cathedral.
Of course. And if you look back that in Ukraine just 2 years prior, there's been hundreds of church fires all throughout Europe, mostly in France, but really everywhere. And 2 years prior, one father was actually his throat was slit. Of course, beheadings indicate a certain jihadist kind of bend to them. I'm not saying they're exclusive, but that's what you picture when you see that. So clearly you have a Don King at work here, who is, before the fight, he's staging an argument between Conor McGregor and the other opponent in front of the cameras. This is a bait and hook scheme. This is why all of us are emotional assets without knowing. Every one of us is hearing this jingle that the news is giving us and treating it like a karaoke machine, where all we get to do is repeat it. And if one of us doesn't repeat exactly, well, the cause of the fire was unknown, everyone else gets to correct you and say, no, you can't speculate, because the New York Times told us the cause of the fire is unknown. It's this emotional attachment that's forcing us into slavery, and we're just not willing to see it. So many of us are convinced that slavery has to have a chain. If there's not a chain, then there's no slavery there. And that's what we keep missing about Alex Jones. That's what we keep missing about Donald Trump. That's what we keep missing about Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. These are wrestling characters. Our country is not a system that starts and ends in DC or in our states. There's a third child of Abraham running the show, and it's all over the world, and none of us are catching it because we're lost in the triangulation.
Absolutely. Self-destructive oscillations in a silent war. Silent weapons in a quiet war was something that we got out of the Behold a Pale Horse. And the self-destructive oscillations, that's that's if you're Google and you don't put an Easter doodle up on Google, but you put up Ramadan, you put up everything else, even Earth Day, but you skip Easter with your doodle, then these Christians feel attacked. Meanwhile, all the Democrats and everybody in the Twitter sphere and on the news is calling them Easter worshipers. And so they feel attacked, they feel defamed, and therefore you're starting to get the rumble of an army. In the same way with Alex Jones and the cry of 9/11 was an inside job, something that I battled with them for a long time on, saying, look, you're destroying your own nation by saying your government is complicit in this crime. If you don't see this, and now of course it's blown up into even more, where everybody's out to get Hillary in prison, Obama in prison, let's put Trump in prison. And everyone has been caught up in destroying their own nation from within. And no matter how many times I cried to those 9/11 truthers, look, you guys, there's a bigger picture here. And to say it's an inside job is just to follow suit and destroy your own nation from within. I saw this from the time they brought Bill Clinton out and said that he had inserted a cigar in Monica Lewinsky. From that moment on, I knew the destruction was coming, and I followed it. They took down the president, Bill Clinton, then they forced the president into office. They then got an unconstitutionally viable president, Barack Obama, and then finally the doofus or honey boo boo effect, bringing the most division, I think, our nation, obviously the most division our nation has seen since the time of slavery, which is Donald Trump. I've never seen, families are ending, relationships are ending, just because of the belief or disbelief as Donald Trump as someone that matters. It's crazy to me.
Well, a lot of this is footholding too, where each of these archetypes can be used to imbue power or to lose it. And that's what's built into the division. When you stoke something like 9/11, which I do believe was an inside job, but I also think that the whole goal has always been to bring the country down. It's always been we're going to bring the country down, but we're just going to profit off of it, and we're going to constrict it like a boa constrictor. We're going to let it breathe for a little bit. Then we're going to squeeze it again. Then we're going to let it breathe for a little bit. We're going to squeeze it again. And we're going to laugh the whole time over, man, these guys just don't get it. Like we could just keep escalating the false flags. And 9/11 was just the latest one of those vibrations. They're waiting for us to implode ourselves. But at the same time, we've been programmed so deeply through fear that we're not willing to jump up and leave. We're not willing to look at any other way except for this isn't happening. This isn't happening. The cause of the fire is unknown. Like whatever it takes to allow us to stay dry, to not get our feet, muddy. That seems to be the same control. And as long as they keep inserting different ideas, like a man who maybe was wearing a turban at the top of Notre Dame, or maybe some pictures of a gelatin art project in the World Trade Center, or maybe a passport that was fallen down, or even Julian Assange, who's the only thing he's really saying about 9/11 is, well, there's like maybe five hijackers that weren't from Saudi Arabia originally. This is all about injecting narrative after narrative that just keeps dividing and chopping us up. And that's why it works. That's what makes it effective, because you can't even have a conversation about, well, who runs the black nobility? How does that actually work? You can't even start to say names because you lose everybody in the minutia, of whose name is what, who's doing what. Meanwhile, we're all still falling for the emotional hook of a pyramid, satanic. I'm talking about satanic meaning like a vacuous machine, kind of a network that we just keep falling into through dopamine. It's purely from an emotional standpoint. It hurts to have to argue with someone about who did this. Like, meanwhile, other people are over there going, well, what do you mean? We already know who did it. Everything's fine. It's like so much more comfortable saying, well, the cause of the fire is unknown. That's the fact. That should show us all how much mind control is there. That should show us all just how bad it's gotten. You know, we have two parties, and Israel just had their election a week or so ago. They had 42. Like, they have 42 choices for a political party. We have two, and yet we're so convinced. No, this is the way it should work. This is the best idea. I promise. It's crazy.
Absolutely. And then everybody deriving their information from inference from situations like I pet goat or even Q.
Yeah, of course. That was part of the thing that drew me some fire in my article, was that I explained that, well, wait a minute. People are saying that Q would want, if the media was to ask the president about Q, that would expose everything. But it actually would do the opposite. What you see is Trump is walking a very fine line between nuances, between all the different factions. In my article, I showed two pictures of Trump. One's with Scott Adams, a cartoonist who's definitively anti-Q, like massively, out in front, Q's not real. And 2 weeks later, he meets with Lionel, more of a conspiracy theory kind of a media guy, who is predominantly pro-Q, who is more pro-Q than anyone else. So I'm showing people in the article that, look, this is what Don King does. He's like, okay, we're going to have a press release. If he didn't want to fight, he wouldn't have both fighters in the same room at the same time. He'd introduce each of them individually, and say, let's get to know this fighter. He wants them there at the same time. He wants you to know that he doesn't have a side. This is the only way you gain control over the mind of America, is you can't commit. You can't step too deeply into any genre, because it's going to hurt you on the other side. That's why politicians are only effective as liars. That's why the best you could ever see in office is someone who's chaotic good, someone who's willing to bend the rules, but maybe still wants something that's positive, as they get to the finish line. But the whole time, you're never going to know. Like, you're never going to know the whole time, because the moment he shows his cards, it's over.
Yeah, that's the truth about the heroes of this story, is you're never going to see them. You're never going to know they're there until the effects are seen, because, yes, exactly. The moment you pop your head up, it's going to be chopped off. And they definitely have instilled that fear in us with the takedown of Alex Jones and Julian Assange, and, made people, I mean, there were others, of course, but currently there's these two in our mind to say, well, I don't really want to talk about crisis actors. I don't really want to talk about false flags because, well, one, they're going to take down my YouTube channel, or they're going to take me to prison, or they'll make up a YouTube channel just to put my deposition out on YouTube. Did you see that? I mean, this is a random note, but that the attorneys that were prosecuting Alex Jones in that deposition created their YouTube channel 2 days before uploading the Alex Jones video, and then that's the only video they have on their YouTube channel.
Wow.
It's really bizarre.
Yeah.
Of course, it was as if the questions to Alex Jones in that were set up in a way, either the prosecutor was so arrogant that he didn't know how stupid he was, or it was just for the show, because every question seemed to be formed in a way that Alex could squirm out of it. Are you the first one on the entire planet to do this? You can easily answer no. The type of questions that were asked, and then the weird video edits and all of the things that were set up. Most lawyers are like, this is just craziness and would never be allowed. And yet then they make a whole YouTube channel just to broadcast it to everyone. And I would say in a poker game, Alex won that one.
Yeah. As I unravel what's really happening outside of country, it seems so clear that as long as you can control just what that narrative is out front, that's really all you need, that everything else will kind of take care of itself. And so, just like you were mentioning earlier, it's about Uh, all you got to do is jab one sheep just right with your staff and just the right place, and that injects enough of a vibration where the rest of the herd understands that that's not an option, that you don't go behind that dogwood tree. It's not going to work over there. Anyone who goes over there gets in trouble, so I'm not going to go over there anymore. And that's really what we keep forgetting. We keep forgetting that we have such a short-term memory as a group, as a focus. We've been bred a long time that things are going to be solved in 30 minutes. There's going to be a clear good guy. There's going to be a clear bad guy. The good guy's not going to lie. The bad guy's always going to lie. And these are diametrically not true. It's literally the exact opposite. That
Right.
If you were to be a good guy, the only way you could be a good guy is to pretend like you're a bad guy. You probably even have to do bad things just to be able to get in a position where you could somehow become a good guy. So
Right.
all the good that we're pulling from life right now, I can pull good from Donald Trump because of his psychology. Whether he intends it or not, he's bringing back an archetype of self-supremacy to people. The idea that one can master themselves. I don't know if that was intentional of him or not. I would imagine it's not. However, I do have fantasies that the marriage between Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner is a lot like a wishbone that you get over Thanksgiving, where you have two families that have come together. You have, Benjamin Netanyahu is the godfather of Jared Kushner. This is very much an old school wedding of like France and Germany, sending their children to wed. When I first hear that, I think, oh gosh, that means Israel's controlling America, because Israel does control America. But I still have this fantasy in my mind of this wishbone ceremony. And Ivanka is wearing like General Lee rebel flag underwear underneath her dress, and we can't see it, but it's there. She's got the General Lee on, and it's not that Israel adopted Trump, it's that Trump adopted Israel. That's the closest fantasy I can have right now to holding any kind of hope for any kind of change in the federal government. But that goes directly against every single bit of evidence that I've written about, that I've gathered, which is that the very first thing that we did when Trump was elected was to fulfill his promise by taking out Saudi Arabia from a hotel room, from the penthouse hotel room, when all those princes were apparently taken down. That could have been the fall of the country, and we just don't know it yet. So what we're looking at more is this Balfour Declaration that's opening up. That's why the third temple has incense burning in it now. That's why there was a live sacrifice, blood. There's a lamb, by the way, but it was a live blood sacrifice, which has never been allowed before, back on the temple. That's why I think after this Sri Lanka and Notre Dame hit, we're probably looking at a big mosque going down. A big mosque will be hit next. And that'll be this rock'em sock'em match, where you've got the two plastic robots on the surface and they're trying to punch each other's jaws out. And no one looks underneath the ring and sees that there's these plastic handles, and all it takes is a thumb. You can control the entire country, from one person's thumb. That's the harder truth that so many of us are emotionally not ready to accept.
Yes, the thumb, the system, the ability to control us quietly through economics and social media, or mainstream media, Hollywood. I mean, personally, don't see any of the Avenger movies myself. Anything that comes through Disney is tainted, and we forget, and most don't even care, of things like the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, things relating back up to the Illuminati, that relate to the fact that the Pope is a Jesuit, and that Jacques de Molay burnt at Notre Dame. The ideas of these secret societies being forming back, this was something that Bill Cooper really was on the forefront, just behind Holy Blood, Holy Grail. But Holy Blood, Holy Grail obviously was a narrative, trying to spread its story. But the idea is, again, that these are high-profile rituals that we're witnessing that are done in so many ways for the public consumption. There's been so many of these now since Y2K on forward, where we're seeing not just in terrorist attacks, but in Super Bowls and celebrations, these high-profile rituals that are celebrating these orders that are keeping up this new world order. You just don't hear enough from people. Again, the term Illuminati just gets tossed about and abound, but no one can define that. I know of 4 definitions for the word Illuminati, one being the Council on Foreign Relations, one being the actual body from Adam Weishaupt, and if you're a Discordian, then it's you.
Yep.
So we're lost in this quagmire of disinformation, constantly looking at, like you say, the 2 plastic robots just beating each other up. Meanwhile, we feel like we're in the middle and need to pick a side. And all the while, the system, the wall is being built, right?
That's why I try and remind people as much as possible that there are 3 children of Abraham, and each of those children were given a book. And if we can't look at that book with a little bit more scrutiny, if we can't stop and go, let's think about this. Who gave us this book? Who was the editor of this? What was the Council of Trent about? What was the Council of Nicaea about? Why would you spend 18 years talking about how to formulate a church if it wasn't to control people? These books are part of the show. They are part of why we are so connected through dopamine to them. And I don't want people to reject them. I want them to understand that it's the archetype that they're connected to. There are heroes that you have. Alex Jones can be your hero, and you can still understand that he's an asset. It's okay that he's both. The same thing with Bill Cooper. The same thing with Donald Trump. It's when we try and pry someone's thumbs off their archetype, whether that be a church, a religion, or a politician, that's where you're going to get that fight. And because people draw power from these archetypes, and when they draw power to them, they identify with it. So if you've identified with an archetype for years and years and years, and then someone comes up and tells you, hey, your archetype's an asset, or your archetype's a shill, it's deteriorating all that power you gave yourself. You now feel like you're not worthy of that anymore, or that you've somehow lost that. And it's that kind of electrical impulse that really happens, where we're going around shorting each other out. We're connecting the positive and the negative instantly together on the battery, and within seconds that battery is now shorted out. That's what we're doing to each other. But at the same time, we're all trying to find the truth. We're all trying to uncover the alchemy of why is this all happening to us. And that's why I tried to focus this book on the emotional connotations that lead us to mind control, to remind people that this is how you adopted this agenda yourself. It's okay, but you have to peel apart what's actually powerful from the archetype versus what's more dogma, versus what's more like, well, I have to, if I want to hang out in this tent, in the Q tent, for example, if I want to hang out with people that believe in Q, I'm not going to be able to say that this is a larger scheme. I'm not going to be able to say that Trump wants greater Israel. I'm not going to be able to say that Q could be invaded by Mossad. That if Mossad wanted to do anything to control the country, one thing they would do maybe is start Q. Because now you end up with a loyalist group that's on the other side, that's pushing as hard as they can for a Zionist agenda, that's pushing as hard as they can for, let's turn back and look at Saudi Arabia. Let's look at how bad Iran is. Because if you look at Q, that's what Q's talking about. Just like if you look at Assange's talking about Gore Vidal. He's talking about the FBI. He's not talking about 9/11. All these archetypes are truth archetypes, but they're all constricting truth. And that's how you would convince someone that you know the truth. It's no different than the New York Times saying about Notre Dame, the cause of the fire was unknown. You now emotionally have something that you can take and work with.
Absolutely. It's It's crazy times. It's near impossible to get your finger on what is exactly happening, no matter how much you look at it. And never before in the history of humanity have we ever received this much information, and knowing of everything going on the planet instantly. It's amazing to me how quickly the word spreads. You can ask somebody, "Hey, did you hear about, blah blah blah?" And immediately they're like, "Yeah, it was in my feed this morning," and everybody knows, and it becomes the topic du jour. It's
Yeah.
it's an amazing time.
And that's what makes it so vorpal, so dangerous, is that you, if you were controlling the world, you would want to own Reuters. You'd want to own Associated Press. Just like that scene out of I Love Lucy, where she's her and her friend are there, and out of the conveyor belt are all these chocolates, and the chocolates are coming out, and they're trying to do their job, and she starts eating them because they're coming out too fast. When you're the AP or you're Reuters, you completely control everyone in that room. They are mesmerized by the newness of information. They don't have time to process what's true. They don't even have time to build a crazy conspiracy board, on the other side of the room where they've said, wait, every day at 10:30, more chocolates come out. We should look at that. Like, there's no time for that because there's all these chocolates being spilled and you don't know what's inside. So you don't know if it's the really crappy ones, or if you don't know if it's like a really good one. You don't know until you try it. And that's how they win. They win because we are finite creatures. We only have so many calories that our brains can burn to try and discern this information. This is the key to mind control. It's not that you have the right information. It's not that you have the wrong information. It's that you have their information. That's the only tool that you're ever going to be given. So you're only going to be considered what you have. Imagine trying to explain to Lucy what a carrot is if she spent her whole life on that chocolate factory. She's just not going to function. There's not going to process. There's going to be an emotional rejection to anything having to do with that. It completely breaks her frame of reference. That's the emotional mind control.
I remember the first time I felt empowered by the World Wide Web, and that was back at the Seattle protest against the International Monetary Fund and the World Trade Organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to watch through indie media the entire scenario, how it unfolded, and could easily pull out the anomalies as to what was going on. I later, this was the first time I felt like, wow, I have a bird's eye view. I'm getting reports from everybody's phones and tweets, and I don't even know if Twitter existed at that point. But we were getting all this through indie media where it was being compiled and then projected out to the world for everybody to witness and watch as the whole scene was set up, as everybody gathered there for a protest, which obviously has no effect whatsoever, facing off riot squads, which are obviously not the enemy, and then having the riot squads be transformed into these monster giant men on this third day. Meanwhile, the narrative showed where agent provocateurs were going down the streets, kicking in windows, and then this, as a lady's following them with the camera and they're kicking in the windows, she's like, where are all the police? She turns around, and of course the police had used this as a sign to open fire on all of the innocent public standing there. And of course there were deaths, there were severe injuries through rubber bullets and beanbags and CS gas and all the things they threw at these kids in the street. And you could witness each thing as it happened. This was a mind-boggling event for me, and was definitely the moment I felt, wow, we could really use this to get, to see the truth of a situation instead of the narrative that's being fed to us. Because of course the news just showed riots in the streets as protesters burned down the city in Portland. And of course, then I went to the next one. I was like, well, if they're going to do that, let them do it to me. That was my mindset at the time. So what was it, 1996, I think? I think that somewhere around there. I'm standing in the streets of DC facing these same riot squads, but there was no violence. There was no attacks. But of course, as I left the protest, after watching hundreds of people get arrested and taken into dank quarters and processed one at a time for parading without a permit, they made about 30 grand off of that quick swoop there. But as we traveled up the coast from the protest, all the news would show was violence, 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 violence. And I never, in the entire time being there, saw one moment of violence from riot squads or otherwise. I was actually hanging out with the riot cops and some of the other cops. So, we do now have the ability to try and form or share the truth or share the narrative as it's going on, actually. But yet there's so much congestion out there that more people would rather listen to comedians talking about conspiracy theory than people that are digging into this. That drives me crazy.
Yeah. Well, there's improvement, because if you look at Charlottesville, that was like, they corralled the streets off. They ran the good guys, like I'm saying, like the red hats versus the black hats. It doesn't matter. What I mean is that they ran one group through the gauntlet of the other group. And that was a controlled demolition. The country did really well with that. When I say really well, I'm talking about how they used to react to stuff.
What was this
past.
event?
The Charlottesville. This was the Charlottesville. Started over. The idea was to start over a statue, but this was where Heather Heyer was. She died on scene. She had a heart attack. It was reported that she was hit by a car. The car. This was billed as a white nationalist versus everyone who isn't thing in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it flopped as a media event. It flopped. It just didn't go over that well as others. More false flags are getting, they're having less of effect. I think Parkland, I was surprised at how many saw through Parkland, because when I listened to the transcripts of that tape, it became really clear that when the dispatcher asks them for a shooter description and they said, the shooter is a male, his name is Nicholas Cruz. Anyone who knows how this goes down would realize that's not a shooter description. That's giving the name of a suspect. But how would you be on scene, not knowing any of the kids there? How is having a name helping you to identify what the shooter looks like? There's something odd there.
Yeah.
And so many people were able to look into that whole story and go, how does a pipsqueak, like a really tiny, skinny guy, like have all that Kevlar on, have a full gas mask on, kill 17 people, and then go to McDonald's, and then go to Subway right after?
Yeah, you're talking James Holmes, you're talking Adam Lanza,
it's
again and again.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to wake up from that. And I say that because since I started, and you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, but since I started, I've noticed that there's more people on the side of scrutiny now that are on the sidelines going, well, all I know is that's not true. like right. Whatever's going to come out is
so much better than coming up with your own opinion. I mean, honestly, if you don't know, you don't know. Admit it. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. So things are getting better, but I don't know if they're getting better fast enough. I really hope they are, but it's not going to be until we start to become the news ourselves, until we start to define our own narratives ourselves, that we can break free, from the mind control. And it's only going to be emotional. It's only going to be because it feels emotionally better to not look at Charlottesville and go, well, yeah, our country is thriving with underground white t-shirt racists that have swastika flag that's not hung on a wall in an altar, but folded in crease and just pulled fresh out of a bag and used for a photo shoot. Meanwhile, we're supposed to believe that 400 tiki torches were purchased from a local Walmart that has maybe 30,000 residents, within the whole place. It's this, people are starting to just do the math more because it's emotionally more comfortable versus buying the media narrative like New York Times just did by saying, oh no, Notre Dame was an old, dusty old barn. And oak, well, ancient oak, it burns really easily. And it doesn't. It's the exact opposite. And not only is it the exact opposite, but this is the most advanced fire prevention system in the world. People are tired of that narrative. They're tired of looking at that stuff and going, yeah, that must be true, because that's what they told us. It's not doing us any good, It's just bringing more of the stuff later on. So that's why I think decentralization is so important. I've been pushing the archetype of a campfire lately, because if you can think about a campfire, only so many people can fit around a campfire. And so you create this sort of like a node network, almost like a confederacy of thought, where you've got like millions and millions of micro groups that are, just like a microbrew, or just like you would find a local flavor to a certain area. You also have a local truth. You have a local divination for what's going on in the world. That's why I think the only way we're going to defeat this system is to break free from the satanic chains of blind trust, and to return ourselves to a bioregional approach where it's campfires, where it's voluntary form of government rather than a coercive form of government. This is a alchemy of consent. This is a track that is going to be scary for most. Most people aren't going to feel comfortable doing this. They like having this patriarchal figure that's outside of themselves. They like having a savior and a protector, even if that savior is the one that's shearing you every week. Even if every Monday and Tuesday, all your sweat and all your equity is being pushed into this can that goes to feed this machine that literally uses it to turn around and kill people and blame you and call you bad. And that it's because of you that we can't trust ourselves to get on an airplane. It's because of you that we can't have nice things, when the whole time we're just keep giving them silver, and we're not willing to admit that that's our consent, that we're saying, okay, every time we pay our taxes, we're telling them, yes, 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 whatever you feel is best, yes. And that's I'm going to use the word sin. I don't use that word a lot, but that's a sin that we're not seeing, that we're not aware that we're making that mistake, because everyone's making it together. And as long as all of us are doing it, as long as it's just a tiny sliver of silver, just enough, it doesn't feel bad. It's like, I imagine this group. You're in this group of 5 guys, and 4 guys say, hey man, let's all put our money together and let's go do something bad to that farmer. You'd be like, no, let's not do that. But now there are 10 people and it took you a little bit less. You'd still maybe be like, no, let's not do that. But there's a breaking point. If you have 100 people, if you have 1,000 people, if you've been brought up the entire time where all these 1,000 people are asking you from a very young age, hey, we'd like to take some of your silver and go burn down someone's farm, there's going to be a breaking point where you're going to say that's okay. It's not going to take much. It's just going to take a little trauma, just a little tiny bit of trauma to be injected, where you can go, did you hear what Farmer Brown did? He kicked a horse. Yeah, that poor old horse. He kicked that. I don't have video, but he did. Now the next time, hey, we should do this. This is our consent. We've been reeling it out like fishermen. And we think we have all the line in the world, but that's us. That's our humanity. That's our consciousness going into this. That's why it's so frustrating to see so many people just keep doling it out every Monday and Tuesday. Here's 40% of my labor. Here it is. Here it is. Keep going. We have to wake up, and we have to wake up.
And you really can't quit on your own. It's not like one person can just quit paying their taxes or paying their mortgage or paying their student loans, because they'll just end up in court or prison.
Exactly.
It takes an entire mindset. Now, surprisingly, Behold a Pale Horse by Bill Cooper opens with the concept that I was guided. I had so many, and this is Bill speaking, so many synchronicities guiding me that I now firmly believe in the hand of God in my life. And I would say this very same thing. And so there's this other power that is completely ignored by humanity, and that is the power of these miraculous coincidences that lead you to where you're supposed to be to fulfill your life's purpose. This is not part of the plan for the New World Order at all. And for me, seems to be right at the heart of the answer. Whereas you don't know where you're going. You don't know the direction. You're allowing the universe, God, whatever you need to call it, to guide your path in a way, but you have to fulfill the synchronicity. You have to get out of your house. You know, you did some traveling, right? You've done around festivals and things, and you've had this happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had tragedy that have kicked me out of cities, you know, and towns. Like different things happen. And just like Bill Cooper said, you know, the hand of God works in a lot of different ways. It's actually shaped my view of the cabal. Analyzing what Bill Cooper says about that, I could make a case for why there's evil in the world.
Tell me.
So when I used to work at Godfather's Pizza, there was this like giant stainless steel dough bowl, and it had a mean arm, you know, this piece of metal. In fact, there was a training video where it's like, if you get your hand caught in there, you'll die, you know, and there's a story they tell you where someone died. I don't know if it's true. But anyway, you know, every day you go in there, you put your flour in there, you put all this stuff in there, and you turn that arm on. And that arm would just tear that dough up, man. I mean, it would just tear it up just over and over and over and over and over again. There was nothing that dough could do. Now, imagine yourself, you know, a yeast is actually the smallest living organism that I can find. I've looked this up to say, what would be the smallest sentient being you can find? And a yeast is, I believe, a one-celled organism. And so I pictured myself, well, if I was a yeast, I would have no concept of Freeman or James or Godfather's Pizza. I would have none of that would occur to me at all. So I'm being put in this giant bowl, this giant place, and they're just beating the crap out of me, man, with lies, with dissonance, with gaslighting, with just a constant, ever going system of evil that just keeps turning and turning. Why? Why is this happening? And for years, I would say it's because the world's broken. That's what it is. And we have to fix the world. We have to stop this giant arm. And only lately have I looked at that and going, okay, first of all, that arm's not going to stop. It doesn't matter what I do. But second of all, why is the world broken? Maybe it's not broken. What would be the purpose of this arm? What would be the purpose of all this evil? And it comes back to alchemy. It comes back to the idea that our hearts are rusty. Our consent is like a whore of Babylon, where we just send it out wherever it wants to go, whatever night, school night, whatever. It's just like, whore it up, baby. We don't care what you want to do. This is your consent. You can give it away to whoever you want. And so we're not ready. We're not ready our dough is not risen yet. We are still going to be beaten. We're going to be beaten until we say, hey, maybe I should stop giving my consent away. Like maybe I should stop everything I can to make sure that I'm completely aware of all of my actions. Every molecule in my being, every cell I own is an extension of my consent, which means my sweat, my vibrations, my labor, everything that I do, I'm responsible for. And until I can take responsibility for that, I'm tarnishing it. It's rusting in front of me. It's becoming brittle. But instead, this world is here to make us stainless. It's the nature of alchemy. We're turning lead, blind consent, into gold, which is fully aware consent. And imagine how much better that pizza is going to taste when it's risen. Imagine the difference between taking a spoon that you place in your mouth and imagine the taste of rusty, gritty rust or of finely polished silver or gold spoon. It would make sense that that's what this whole world's about, that we're an alchemical mixing bowl. And it's only going to keep getting harder. We're only going to be eaten more by the machine until enough of us froth up to the top, until enough of us rise and find our own alchemy and declare ourselves ready, ready for the next step, whether it's going to be pizza sauce in an oven. Maybe that's bad, but there's a next step, and there's nothing we can do about, there is something we can do about this, but the answer is not to call the world broken. The answer is to look at ourselves and say, how can I just make myself the best version inside this broken bowl, inside this destiny that's going to tear me up anyway.
Which really brings us back to the idea that everyone thinks they are doing this for the right reasons. I mean, the evils in the world that we see, they're not done just out of malice. It's not like Ming the Merciless, who just wants to bring upon destruction for the sheer joy of it, for the lulz, right? No, these people, George Bush, Hillary Clinton, they all think that they have a true purpose in doing what they're doing. And that's also something that people miss. And a lot of times I do think the same as you, like, and I would think the Illuminists and the Satanists thought the same thing, is to cause this alchemy, to bring about the ultimate evil so that you can bring about the ultimate good. But either way you slice it, everyone that's doing something is doing it because they believe it's the best possible answer.
That's exactly right. And isn't that what's called the great work?
Right.
Isn't that really what the great work is all about? Is to bring about a mass alchemical transmutation instantly. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just telling you that just like what Freeman said, that people, bad guys are not, they're not fiddling their thumbs, laughing maniacally, like when they get up in the morning. That's not how it works. They have dogs, they have kids, they feel good about themselves. They feel bad about themselves. I don't mean to humanize them, but I have to. Why? Because they're humans. And this is part of why we're all here. It's us. It's us have decided. I'm the one that's decided that it's worth it to me to stay in North Carolina and to still pay into this tax system versus to try and emancipate myself, to build a boat, and write a contract and write my name in all capital letters and say, I, James Marshall True, hereby do end all contracts given to me under the birth canal of, Rome, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to liberate yourself. I haven't gone to live on a sailboat yet. I haven't gone to another country or to Lieberland over in Europe and tried to declare myself a truly free person. So I'm not ready either. I'm not alchemically cleansed yet. I still have a way to go. And it's interesting. What I think is interesting about what I'm saying is that it's the opposite of an ascension program. It's the opposite of a program where you're trying to escape the world. I want us to do the opposite. I want us to fully immerse ourselves in every single organ in our body, in every single molecule, so that we can dictate where our consent goes. It's the other way. It's don't look up, look inside. Like, take your fingers and stick them as deep as you can down your arm sockets and fill your fingers' skin like a glove. Like, put yourself completely inside your body, as deep as you can possibly be. Sit inside the throne of your pelvis. Put the crown of your skull on top of your head, and claim all of this power. Claim all of what it means to be a human. Because right now, humans called unnatural. It's called a dirty carbon footprint. It's called all these nasty things. It's we are yeast that hasn't fully imbued our own space. We need to rise inside of ourselves. And if anything was to bring about the great work in a positive way, it would be something like that. Otherwise, it's just going to be what happened to me and probably what happened to you, which is trauma. It's trauma that wakes us up. Because that's really what wakes us up the most, is enough bad stuff happens to you where you're finally uncomfortable enough to get up and change your situation. Otherwise, you're just hypnotized by the comfort of it all. The adage of comfortably numb comes to mind.
Yes, the creeping malaise. Well, I wonder what will come of this ritual of Isis and what this really all abodes in the world of Osiris, Isis, Lucifer, and Venus, and bringing this story to light in their magical realms. I'm very curious as to how this Notre Dame, our mother, our lady, Isis, plays out in this story.
Yeah. It's sad what we're doing to the archetype of Isis. Isis used to be the bringer of all the gods, and now she's a terrorist group that's trying to
Right.
kill the Catholic Church. Same with the swastika, same, you know what I'm talking about. But this is what they do.
Yes. But we have this synchronistic world, folks, and it really does exist. And everybody that gets into this finds that the universe is speaking to them. I will constantly state, and I'm sure that James would say it's true as well, that the information comes looking for you, and you just need to be an open receptacle to it. I've never gone looking for anything that I knew. It absolutely chased me down, changed me as a person. You know, I took it in. I took in the alchemy of it all, and then was able to stand strong because I'm outside of that cattle realm. I could not get myself to go and follow the system. So I wandered the streets, and I wandered the streets for years. And I found that the world works that way, that there's this bond between humans that create this synchronistic path that, you know, you just can't define. And over again, I know this is the solution to our problem, to the magicians that are causing rituals to Isis.
Yeah, I agree.
So, well, I think that pretty much covers our first hour here. We're getting this whole idea. Trump is one that's just a complete mystery to me. I'm starting to get a clearer and clearer picture with the more and more people I speak to. And yet, you know, he was exactly what I expected as I looked at the world and said, well, next thing they need to do is make America look like buffoons. We need to look like the villains. We need to look then like buffoons and, you know, heathens to the rest of the world so that it's okay for us to burn. And that is exactly where we're at right now. So Trump, good or bad, doesn't matter. The perception, the narrative that's being told about America is what matters. And we've got to combat that with somewhat of a friendship agenda, letting the rest of the world know, look, you know, we're not that. Right?
Well, it's interesting if we trace the migrant snake, the original icon for the Aztec culture, the island in the middle of the lake was, we would look for an eagle that's piercing a snake in its beak. And it's so fascinating that we have this migrant caravan that started in Honduras that's literally a human snake that's marching its way up right through Mexico. And we have an eagle that's trying to stop that. So the alchemy is beyond Trump. In fact, I could argue that as I call him an orange lion. He's an archetype of a lion, and he's on the carpet for sure. He's doing his own things. Some things he's doing aren't really helping the cabal. Some things he's doing are hurting it. And that's why I was saying earlier about it's really interesting to watch him work, because he literally does walk that line between every single possible crack he's stepping on. He doesn't want to be seen as in one way or the other. But meanwhile, underneath the surface, all the tanks are being moved, all the pieces are being moved to a same conclusion, which is we're going to have peace in the Middle East, the same way that the mafia brought peace to New York, which is when first thing they did is, you know, made it not peaceful. And then they came in and offered protection from that. That's basically what we've been doing with the Middle East for a long, long time now. And that, of course, is going to have dramatic effects. Meanwhile, you have over here this one strange situation where we're building a wall up, where we're saying no to the rest of the world. That could be something that makes us look bad, but also it makes us look good, because it's reinvigorating this idea of self-supremacy. So that's what I mean by it. it's almost like it's backfiring, maybe on purpose, maybe not. I'm just as confused by Trump as you are.
Yeah, we will have to wait and see, that's for sure. But guys, we're going to take this conversation even deeper over into the members section where it gets quite a bit wild. So I hope you'll come over to freemantv.com and subscribe, help support these efforts here and getting the word out. Subscribing's easy. Just come on over freemantv.com, hit subscribe, and you can get a free week if you want, or jump right in and get on there. So I highly recommend it because there's just so much data, guys, and I want to keep it on the internet. You know, the moment you could be erased so quickly, it's incredible how quickly all of the information that we have here could just vanish. So I want it in as many hands as possible. As always, I have to thank Steve Mercer for bringing me these amazing, wonderful people to speak to. And if you guys have any guest suggestions, write producer Steve at freemantv.com. And let's keep this ball rolling because we need this information, this intel to feel sovereign, to be able to know that we can step aside and get out of this. Now, James's website, jtrue.com. You can find all the articles and works. And what else you got there, James? I know you've got 2 books that I know of, and just tell people how to get in touch with you and what they can get from you.
Yeah, my book Blueprint for Mind Control describes a lot about what we just talked about. It's 47 short stories that show the emotional hooks that cause mind control and how to deplug from them. That book's available on Amazon or on Kindle too, and I encourage everybody to check it out. It just came out. It's getting some really great reviews. And I'd love to share it with you.
Nice. Blueprints of Mind Control. It's so important. It's so important. It's you know, we all want to stand strong and say, this doesn't have a hold on me. They certainly never strapped me in their dental chair and put their microbes into me, or microbes, yeah. Well, you know, that's the way the world's working now with CRISPR, guys, but we won't even go there yet. But yes, you know, it doesn't require that, folks. It's just these little head games and our continued commitment to them. So let's end this battle. I'm ready for us to break free, alchemy out, and find our way to this new world that is not with their order. So we will have a new world order, just not of their making. That's the goal.
Campfires.
So, yes, exactly. Never before have we been able to commune like we do now, and never have we been able to display life as it is all over the planet. So we need to utilize that while we have it and get the truth out to everyone. So thank you all so much for tuning in here every week. And well, we'll see you next week. Let's jump on over into the members section, James.
Great.